male ideology, because wrestling is a sport that men are good at and women aren't so good at. Okay, so they want to get rid of it. And this tells you that their Title IX has nothing whatever to do with money, because wrestling is the cheapest sport you can have. All you need is a mat. And yet they have forced the colleges to abolish 171. And in some colleges where the alumni came in and said, okay, we'll raise the money to finance the wrestling team. No, they won't let them do it. They won't let them do it. Because the feminists have enforced a beat counting rule. It's a new definition of a new word. You know, like gender norming is a new word. Their word in this is proportionality. And they say you can only have, you have to have the same proportion of women on varsity college sports teams as you have women in the university. And now you're running close to 60% women across the board in the universities, and the worst are the ones where they've abolished the men's sports. And it makes no sense, because it is a plain gender difference that women are nowhere near as interested in college sports as men are. I went through college trying to avoid everything that could possibly be construed as athletic, and there are plenty of women like that. And so getting it out on the table and exposing it and talking about it, and what they're doing in the military is another whole area that needs to be exposed.
One thing I've noticed about the modern feminist movement, I'm thinking the last 10 years, is the almost complete silence, with a few exceptions. Nevis and Leno, the wife of Jay Leno being one big exception of the brutality against women within the community of radical Islam. You don't hear anything, or virtually nothing, from the women's studies departments at any college. I just wondering what you thought about that.
Well, what you say is true, and I don't have the right explanation about that, except that if they really did talk about that, maybe it would show how well women are treated in the United States, because the women's arts are just savagely treated in some of those other countries. And if they want to work to raise women out of their mistreatment, they can certainly start in the Middle East, absolutely. But you're right that the feminists don't talk about it.
I have two questions for you this evening. After researching a lot of your opinions and your past, I found out that you were from St. Louis, as I am also from St. Louis. But we come from very different sides of St. Louis, you being from around Alton and I'm from South St. Louis. And we also come from very different sides of this issue. I grew up, I'm not, thank you for that. My question was about your comment about the Constitution, and you had made the comment that since the Constitution was, in effect, ratified, that it was not sexist or had no, I believe your exact words were, equal rights are given in the Constitution. Do you...
No, my exact words were, women have every constitutional right that men have and have had since the day the Constitution was adopted.
Do you include voting rights in that?
Voting is not a constitutional right.
All right, and my second point that
I understand that. Voting was something that was wholly handled by the states. There was nothing about voting in it. It didn't say men could vote and women couldn't vote. It didn't say anything about voting because voting was not a constitutional right. And actually, it's a good question because that frequently comes up. And at certain times in our history, we came to the conclusion that as a nation, we wanted to insist that the states allowed certain people to vote. We got to the Women's Suffrage Amendment. About half the states allowed women to vote at that time, but the nation came to the conclusion that we wanted to say that the rest of the states, the other half states, could not prevent women from voting, and so we passed the constitutional amendment. But men did not. There's nothing in the Constitution about voting being a right.
My second point I wanted to make was that in Betty Friedan's recent, before she died in 1996, her recent essay about the metamorphosis of feminism 2 generations later, she made the statement that we may now begin to glimpse a world where men and women are free to be themselves. Do you feel like that will never be the chance, and that shouldn't be the chance for men and women to have that opportunity to have the same rights? Or should it only be that men should be different and women should be different and have different opportunities?
Well, I feel I've always been myself. And I've always, what right do you have?
There are a lot of rights that, are still, there's the inability for women to get certain jobs. It's obviously progressing since a lot of the movements began.
What is a job women can't get?
There's a lot of discrimination in job markets.
No, I don't think there is.
There is. There's the number of gender in CEOs and the gender of the CEOs and the gender, or male CEOs and women CEOs are not equal. It's not that women aren't fighting for those positions anymore, which they are. They still aren't given to the same. They still are given to the same gender.
Well, maybe they're better. Maybe they work harder.
It's a possibility, but how come women are still being paid 77 cents on the dollar?
Well, that is the biggest lie that the feminists put out.
You mean the Bureau of Labor Statistics?
Sure. Because what they do is to group a whole group of people in the same occupation. For example, they will have the average wage of accountants. And this will include everybody from the senior auditor of a big company with 20 years experience and a couple of degrees, and seasonal workers for H&R Block. And then you take an average of that. And it's really meaningless. It's true for what if you read what they say, because the Bureau of Labor Statistics does not relate the pay to the job that's done. Now, women do not work as many hours per week. They do not stay in the workforce as many years as men. And there are all of these differences. It's a matter of which college degrees. My husband gave the same lecture to all our 6 children. When you go to college, take engineering, because you learn things that are true, you don't learn things that are untrue, you have to unlearn later. 4 sons accepted their father's advice. 2 daughters, no way. They wouldn't do it. Couldn't get them to do it. Now, women take a lot of the soft courses. If you graduate in women's studies, you are probably not going to get paid what somebody who graduates in engineering would pay. That was your choice. And the idea of saying you had the same number of years in college, and therefore there's a pay differential, doesn't tell you any true thing about what's going on in this country.
I meant to say.
In your view, what is the root cause of feminism? Where did all this anger come from?
Where did it come from? Well, I think they would say that Betty Friedan started it with her book. I think that's what they believe. She got a lot of it from Simone de Beauvoir, and Betty Friedan adapted it for the American audience. And they had tremendous access to the media. During all those years I was fighting the Equal Rights Amendment, the media were 98% on their side. Any event they had, any spokesman they had, any argument they had, got full play on the media. We maybe got a pitiful little 2% of the time. And it's a power play. It's an attempt to really get power over men, and to cry around and complain that you're mistreated in order to get it. And fundamentally, I think the problem is attitude. If you're a man or woman, I don't think you're going to succeed if you wake up in the morning with a bad attitude.
I agree with you. I'm just trying to think. It's so contrary to nature, though.